on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram, of course. Hi, it's Andrew Beach, Executive Coach. I'm a teacher of self-education. I help professionals like you communicate value to find great opportunities faster, whether you're working or not. That's through a pragmatic process of personal branding, planning, and effective networking. If that's something you're interested in, of course, we have an application that you can either access in my bio or the description below this video. Today, we're talking about a very simple yet somewhat challenging topic, and that is, how do we manage these virtual interviews? It's something that I think on the both sides of the table, whether you're an interviewee or an interviewer, that it's possible the technology will fail you. And that can actually set a precedent for you in having situations where you're either not presenting your best self, or you might be damaging your brand as an organization. So we wouldn't want that on either side of the equation. So today we're going to talk a little bit about 10 tips to dominate virtual interviews. And this applies on both sides of the table, whether you're an interviewer or an interviewee. So hopefully that has some value. Now, it's perfectly acceptable in this session to share your LinkedIn profile in the description, whether you're on Instagram or any of these other channels. By doing this, you're actually letting people know that the place to connect with you is on LinkedIn, first of all, even though we may be on other channels. I am too. But that's where most professionals hang out. And if you want to connect with other professionals, then by all means, please make sure you take some time, energy, and effort to connect with them on LinkedIn. And if you put that in the description of the chat of the platform that you're on, then we'll have an opportunity to see it and connect with you. And by doing so, what you're saying to people is you're open to being contacted, and you will say yes if someone wants to have a network meeting with you. Now, it's hard enough to get people to say yes to a network meeting. There's so many, I guess, bad actors in networking that it makes it really hard. And so people that come to this session typically know that this is the standard. The standard is you will say yes. And the other standard is that you will make it about mutual benefit, not just about your own needs. So those are just some two thoughts about that. Now, if the topic today you find is interesting and compelling and worthy of being shared, then please, by all means, share this out with your networks, with the people you know that you think might have interest in this presentation today. Now, it doesn't mean you have to share this publicly. You could share it in a private message. You don't have to share it publicly, but if you want to, certainly you can do that. Now, this is Career Happy Hour, and Career Happy Hour means every Friday, 3 p.m. Pacific time, I made a commitment, whenever humanly possible, that I will be here answering your questions about your career, about getting promotions, about personal branding, network, anything really that's on your mind. I might have some perspective or a little bit of advice that you hadn't think about. And so thinking about these different things will give you an opportunity then to indeed have success. Now, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn and you're not on that platform at the moment, then certainly you can find that in my Instagram bio or in the caption of the video that you see here. Good. So let's talk about the 10 tips to dominate virtual interviews. Now, I'm not going to give you per se, at least not in this context, information about interviewing in general. Interviewing in general, I have a whole checklist, and this is a free resource I can provide you if you want it. But on my website, I think you can go there and download the interview checklist. And it's all the things that I've thought about for you to consider in every interview, regardless of the format, so that you don't forget something. There's nothing more important, in my estimation, in a hiring process than the interview. It's the one thing standing between you and an offer, as well as leverage in negotiations. And the only thing you control is your preparation, and the quality of your preparation might lead to that offer and the leverage in negotiation. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to share with you now a slide. It's just a very simple slide that we'll use to talk today about 10 tips for virtual interviewing. And I'll go through some of these 10 tips. And if you're on Instagram, of course, you won't be able to see the graphic, but you can at least hear, and I'll try to describe as best I can what we're talking about here today. Now, these 10 tips are not exhaustive, but they're the ones that I find most often are the ones that people overlook in preparation or in some way mitigating, if you will, their situation so that they have a better outcome to these interviews. And so this is not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the top ones that I believe are valuable to your success. When we're talking about technology and doing these virtual interviews, the one that I think is almost often overlooked is the benefit of hardwiring your PC to a router or through an Ethernet cable or gigabit Ethernet cable. Anyway, it's hardwiring your computer, because what I found is that it's not uncommon, and I have kids too, and some of you may, but there may be people piggybacking your Wi-Fi, and there may be dropped packets and disconnections, and you can't afford for that to happen. One way you can mitigate that is by hardwiring your PC, your computer, your laptop, whatever you have, to the network that you're serving. That means you need to have a computer in order to optimize that particular tip, because some of us might be doing these interviews on our phone. In that case, you're going to be at a disadvantage because you can't always see people fully. You can't increase or decrease their picture, right? It's really problematic to do this on an iPad or an iPhone or something like that, a mobile device. So try to use a PC with a decent high definition web camera if you have it. If you don't, that's not required, but certainly most PCs will come with that webcam. Now, I know you can, when the pandemic came on, you could not touch or even find a webcam, I think, for under $200. And if you did find one, it wasn't in stock. So just because you have access to a webcam doesn't mean that it's going to be the best or even available. But nowadays, now that the supply chains are relatively back in order, you can still pick up a fairly decent webcam for probably $60 to $100, somewhere in that neighborhood. It doesn't have to be a name brand. I obviously recommend Logitech because I think they're the best, at least for prosumer or consumer grade web cameras. So if you are interested in that, just you can go to logitech.com or whatever it is, or Amazon or your favorite portal, and look for an HD webcam from Logitech. So hardwire your PC. That will eliminate a lot of the drop packets. It's more reliable. It's often consistent. And even if your Wi-Fi goes down, often the hardwire will still work. So keep that in mind. The second tip is always test your technology. Always test your technology. So whatever technology that you will be using, use it as if you're using it for that interview. And so if you're using, say, a Windows PC and a Logitech webcam, and I have a studio microphone, just make sure that the audio is good. People can forgive bad video. I mean, it happens. And sometimes you have to turn the video off because your internet speeds may not support that video, high definition video. It might be 270p, and that's really grainy and quite horrible. But I know people that are in rural areas where it just isn't possible for them to get high-speed internet in which to do HD streaming. So, testing your technology and making sure that someone can see you and hear you, more importantly, is critical to your success in a virtual interview. What kind of outcome would you have if the people can't hear you? If they can't hear you, they can't make a decision on your candidacy. Now, they don't have to see you to make that decision because they recognize they're not often going to be 100% focused on your image on the screen. They might be themselves looking in the camera, which is certainly a key skill. And we'll talk about some ideas about how to do that and how to keep engaged and how to kind of work your way into looking into the camera. So test your technology, test your microphone, test your video, test your computer, make sure all the apps are updated, right? I know that Zoom, if you're doing it by Zoom, the thing to recognize with Zoom is it doesn't update itself. You might have an old version of Zoom that isn't supported anymore, and you might have trouble joining those sessions. Your Safari browser might block the application. There's a lot of issues with Zoom itself that you may not be aware of when you think it's still working and you need to update that application. So make sure you test the tech, update those apps, make sure the audio is working, make sure the audio is good quality. In terms of technology, I think that's one that that certainly is rather overlooked, is we don't think about the audio, and we think, okay, well, I'm going to do this on my Bluetooth earbuds, and the Bluetooth earbuds run out of battery, or one of the sides goes out, or there's, it's your hair is hitting the microphone and causing feedback, and you don't realize these things are happening. That's why having maybe a coach or someone like me to help you test this technology and prepare for that is something to consider. And we do have a service called the Interview Preparation Intensive, and it's a 90-minute intensive session where we talk about all these things, make sure they're working well, make sure there's no hiccups on your side as far as the technology goes. Now, on the next tip, the third tip you see here is using the same tools. Using the same tools that you're being asked to use to conduct this interview. That means that if it's on Zoom, that you practice and use the tool called Zoom. If it's on Microsoft Teams, a lot of companies are using Teams now. Then practice and use Microsoft Teams. I think it's downloadable for anybody. It's public to use. You may not have all the features that a corporate version might have, but it's still available and accessible to you to use for free. If it's Skype or Amazon Chime or whatever, I understand some of these tools may not be accessible to you. I have seen candidates that were interviewing on Blue Jeans, and you don't, unless you have a Blue Jeans account, or even sometimes an Amazon Chime account is only good for 10 days or 2 weeks or a month, then you have to pay for those services. And that's unfortunate, but it's always my advocacy. If you can't always use the same tools you're being asked to use in the interview. Okay. It's important that you understand how to use those tools, because there are little idiosyncratic differences between each of these platforms, and understanding how they work and how you can share a screen and how you can adjust things and look at the volume and test your audio and all those things. It's important that you get that navigation piece ironed out so that you're not fumbling around with the technology during the interview. That's not the place we would advocate you do that. Now, the other thing to consider, and I know that it's kind of a challenge, but the camera and its position does make a difference. And so if you're considering a computer, maybe you're looking to buy a computer, or you've been transitioned from a company and you don't have an asset, and so you're looking at these different computers, make sure you pick one that does not have the camera at the bottom of the screen. And so we want that camera to be at the top of the screen, at or above eye level. And so that means you have a flattering presentation. What do you think people think of you when they're looking down, when you're looking down your nose at them? You're looking down upon them, and it's subconscious for sure. But when you're looking down your nose at somebody, typically it's a demeaning presentation and they don't feel very comfortable. And not uncommon in these situations that people will turn off their cameras or disengage from a conversation because they don't feel in some way heard or honored or whatever. So I'm always an advocate of have a presentation of yours that is indeed flattering. And that means at or just a little bit above eye level, so that you're eye to eye, you're equals in that conversation. Or you're looking up to somebody. In that way, you're flattering them by saying, hey, I look up to you. And so that's something, my phone is on top of my monitor. And so I'm always looking up at Instagram, and they're probably a more flattering presentation than we have here on the other channels, because it's kind of right at my eye level. But make sure your camera is positioned at or above your eye level. It's just a more flattering presentation. And then there's the mock interview. Now, this is something I recommend regardless of what kind of interview you're going through, whether it's a phone interview or a video interview or a recorded interview by video, right? There's a lot of different kinds of interviews. And the idea here is that you do your very best to do a mock interview using, again, the tools that this company would be advocating you use. So whether it's me that you hire, or a friend or a family member, somebody across town, or even in the back bedroom, I guess it doesn't really matter as long as they're not in the same room as you, to make sure the technology works, that you're prepared, that you're dressing for success, even though they can't see you from typically the waist down. Dress for success. Some of this is about mindset, and the mock interview allows you to dress for success and be prepared, even if the other side isn't. And this is something I think a lot of organizations should consider in terms of their talent brand, is what message do they want to send by what their hiring teams are wearing to the interview. Because I have had candidates that were, going for fairly, I wouldn't say senior roles, but important roles in organizations, dressed nicely with their button-up collars, maybe a suit or a tie, right? They were dressed for success. They show up to the interview, and this is not a small company, nor is it a company known for its casual dress. Hiring managers showed up in a hoodie, a hooded sweatshirt to the interview. What message are you sending to an interviewee if you don't think it's important enough for you to get dressed up? Not that you have to, but think about the message you're sending if you wear a hoodie to an interview. That may be perception. Perception is reality. We all know this. And if I'm an interviewer, I want to make sure that I'm showing up there serious, that this is an important time for me, the company, and this candidate. And I don't want to show up to this interview in some capacity without having given consideration to what I'm wearing. So this, some of these things apply across the board for interviewers too. You should know your technology works so that you don't come late to an interview or have to reschedule or aren't able to contact the candidate. Just make sure you have your tech ironed out before you get there. So that's the first 5. And just so you know, I do provide support for this. It's called the Interview Prep Intensive. You can go to my website and search. Well, actually, you could search Andrew Beach Interview Preparation Intensive or something like that, Interview Intensive, and you'll be able to find it. Not a problem. I might even go back and edit the caption for this video so that you can have access to that if you're interested. So number 6, lighting in front of you. Lighting in front of you. Now, many of us go into a room that has windows, and that is not something. If you go to a film studio or a news station and you see their room, there is no windows in a recording studio for the news or anything like that. So a lot of these studios don't have windows. They have specialized lighting. All the lighting is in front of the person, not behind typically, because lighting behind you will actually wash out the camera and nobody will be able to see your defining features or your smile or to have that texture or connection with you, because guess what? They can't see you. They only see an apparition. They only see an apparition. And so if you do have lighting, I know in my home studio here, I do have a home studio. I have 2, 4, let's see. I have 7 windows in this room, but you wouldn't know it. The windows are in front of me and to the right of me, which on your side is the left, I suppose. But to the right of me and to the front of me are the windows that are open. The windows behind me are all blacked out because I don't want any light shining into the camera and preventing fine folks like yourself having a good presentation. And so if you do lighting, make sure it's in front of you. And I do have some lighting here. I can cycle it on and off, and you can see it. It makes a little bit of a difference, illuminating my face to have that. Now, yes, I am going to get some shadow or what have you, but that's something I wouldn't worry too much about. Just make sure you have the lights in front of you. You can even buy a very inexpensive ring light. It'll mount on top of your camera. I think I have one here somewhere. I'd have to find it, but it's this little snap-on light that you can put on top of your monitor or on your laptop, and it's just it'll shine some light on your face. So that's the 6th tip. Tip number 7. I am honestly not a big fan of virtual backgrounds. Here's why. Because the technology that's used to outline your torso typically is one that's not very good at depth perception. And what happens is, as you move your hands or try to make a statement, your hands disappear, part of your face disappears. If you have lighter hair, your hair disappears. It's really distracting for a hiring team to engage with you if you're constantly disappearing. It's just really kind of annoying. So for me, my money is on no virtual background. Now, what does that mean then? Well, that means you're not putting on a disguise. You're not trying to cover up something behind you. You're not trying to present something you're not. Of course, I have a home studio. I have a green screen. A lot of people on Instagram can see that because on Instagram, there are no filters for the green screen. So they get to see my green screen. But the green screen is lit behind me. It provides good contrast. And when you see my virtual background, my hands don't disappear. You know, the focus might change and it might be just a little ghosty, but that has a lot more to do with the frame rate that's being broadcast than anything else. It's not the green screen. So I'm not a fan of virtual backgrounds. What I would do is make sure that when I'm doing my mock interview, that I ask people, is there anything behind me that's distracting? Is there anything you think I should eliminate? Is there any clutter there? The other side of that is you may have some really nice things in your home, and people are looking at your nice things instead of paying attention to what you're saying. So I wouldn't dress up the background. I would make sure it's fairly Spartan, non-distracting. You know, plants and stuff like that are fine, but I was helping a candidate prep probably about 2 weeks ago, and he had a autographed bat and baseball inside of a glass case hanging right behind him in field of view. And it was distracting because I was like, wow, that's really cool. I'm looking at this thing and I'm not paying attention to what he's saying. I said, you know, if I'm having that issue as your coach and I'm helping you prep for this interview, what do you think the hiring team's going to have? I would encourage you just, you know, pull it down, set it on the ground if it's easy to take down. You know, otherwise take steps to make sure that your background is not creating a distraction. So I would avoid, if I can, virtual backgrounds. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go buy curtains or, you know, put something up behind you or what have you, or have a Van Gogh painting. I mean, it's not that critical. So that's tip number 7, no virtual backgrounds. Tip number 8, video below the top camera. So what I mean by top camera is we don't want to buy a PC or a laptop where the camera's at the bottom of the screen. That's the worst idea ever. The camera should be at the top of the screen or on top of your monitor if it's an external webcam. And what the idea here is, any of these tools that you'll be using, like Zoom or Skype or Teams, you can make the video of the other person or the collaboration that you're seeing really small. And when you do that, you can put it right up underneath the camera. And when you put it right up underneath the camera, it looks like you're looking in the camera, even though you're connecting with the person in the video. Does that make sense to everyone? So by making it small, putting it up underneath the video camera, I now have an opportunity to almost feel like it's a teleprompter. And this is why teleprompters work. Why? Because they have the words on non-reflective glass rolling in front of the camera that you cannot see. And the reason that people in news are really good at looking in the camera, because they're reading the words, and you'll see them turn their head and their eyes will kind of go like this, right? And so they have to move their head as they move their eyes, so it doesn't look like they're reading something, because they can't just keep their head still and read something, because their eyes track, and it's really kind of distracting. But the idea is, by putting the video right up underneath the camera, you know, I'm not having an unflattering presentation where I'm looking down to the side or over at a second monitor on the right or whatever. I want to make sure that what I'm presenting to them is connection. And part of that is developing, if we can, the capacity to look at somebody in the camera. Maybe you even take a little, a little cutout of Brad Pitt, if you're a lady, or Angelina Jolie, or whoever the sexiest person alive is. Maybe that's your spouse. And just cut a little hole where their eyes are, and put that up over your camera so the lens, right, the camera comes through and can see you, but you're looking at somebody's face over the top of the camera, or even some arrows that kind of point up and say, hey, look here, or a smiley face, something next to the camera or around the camera so that it doesn't block anything. That will allow you to focus on that lens. Putting the video underneath the camera is a good trick, and that'll keep you engaged with your audience. So that's tip number 8. Put the little video screen underneath your camera lens. Tip number 9. Stand for energy. Now, when I do these lives on Friday, I typically stand, and the reason is I don't want my diaphragm compressed. I want to be able to project energy, and it's something that allows me to feel like I'm improving my communications. So if you can handle it and you have a place to do it, I have a stand-up desk. I haven't always had that. I did before this have a milk crate. And so all I did was I would put my keyboard or my laptop on the milk crate, and it would elevate that up from my desk, and I would have something to work with there. You could put a stack of phone books if they still have those. You could use a recycling bin, whatever you have accessible to you to elevate that above your desk. I would suggest doing that, and then you practice it. Now, don't just stand up in an interview when typically you're sitting down. You should do your mock interview standing up. You should test your tech standing up. You should do all of that in the way that you're going to be most comfortable delivering that information. And so think about standing up for energy. That's true of any of these virtual interviews, including on the phone. So that's tip number 9. Tip 10. Tip 10 is something that's often overlooked and people get distracted. They try to have things up on their computer screen. They want to have their notes up there. They want to have all these apps open. They have left their notifications turned on. They didn't put their phone in airplane mode, right? There's a lot of things to consider. My advocacy, turn off everything except what you need to do the interview. And that means everything. Put your phone in airplane mode. Turn off your notifications. Close all your background applications. Don't have a bunch of windows open on the browser, right? They all create a distraction, and they all limit bandwidth. And so if you have a computer that may be a little older, mine is a little older. I think it's probably 10 or more years old. I think it was 20. Yeah, it's about 10 years old now. And it still can stream 720p, but I suspect that it's not going to be able to stream 1080p very well because the system just can't advocate that. And so when I do these streams, I have to literally shut down everything, including Google Drive and OneDrive and anything running in the background that might be sucking cycles on the CPU or the memory. I have to turn that stuff off. So if that's you, if you're like me and you have an older PC, then turning that stuff off will actually give you a better presentation to that audience. Same is true for an interviewer. If you're in a position where you've got, your Slack channels open and you're responding to Slack messages as you're interviewing a candidate, what are you saying to that candidate if you're not even paying attention to what they're saying? Even if you've already identified a finalist, give that person the courtesy of being engaged in the conversation and learning about them, because it will do so much for your talent brand. You will have no idea. That person is a conduit to a bunch of people you don't know. And in the future, you may need their referral to get some quality talent that you're looking for. And if they didn't have a good experience with you, what is the likelihood they're going to refer that person? If they have a bad experience, how many people will they tell? These are things to consider as you're going through and interviewing, and your approach, and what are you wearing, and am I distracted by different things around me? Now, I recognize many of us are work from home, and there could be a distraction called our kids or a dog or those. I'm not talking about that. That stuff does happen, and we often can't control it. And so it is what it is. Hopefully, the other party will have a little more empathy if these things happen, because I don't think there's any perfect interview situation. There's only your best laid plans for a productive and satisfying interview for that hiring team. And so you can't ever assume that all of these things will be absolutely perfect every time. So that's the 10 tips to dominate virtual interviews. If you have any questions about that or additional things you'd like to add, certainly put those in the comments or the chat. I'd be happy to see it. I'm always looking to develop and expand my understanding of what works and what doesn't work, and some ideas and thoughts outside of what I've already talked about are certainly helpful. And I'm here as a resource to you. And so these 10 tips I designed just so you could have some checklist or something you could use to say, okay, I feel like I have what I need to be successful. Good. So that's it for today. If you have any questions, please put those in the chat. I'm happy to answer. Thank you, Scott, for the, yeah, I mean, ring lights are good. I wouldn't say that ring lights are amazing. What I found, especially if you're, because I traditionally, when I'm on these live streams or even on a conversation on Zoom or something, I've got my blue blockers on. Why? Because I don't enjoy the blue light into my eyes. It I think a lot of us are probably getting too much blue light, and it makes it a little more difficult to sleep. Certainly consuming caffeine in a high degree, so I'm trying to reduce my caffeine, trying not to take blue light. So the weird thing about these is unless you get blue blockers that are non-reflective, is always going to reflect light back into the camera. And so you can see me broadcasting there. You can see my cell phone, I think, up there. Anyway, and so you can see the lights, you can see the glare on the screen. And so something to think about is how can I do this and not appear like there's this circle in my eye, right? And then that can in itself be distracting, and if you can do these without glasses, I would give it a try. Try it try doing the mock interview without glasses. Now, I'm not saying that's required. Some of us need it to even see anything. I get that. But if you can, try it. See if it works. See if you get better results. Part of this is, hey, if you have something that's working for you, great, keep doing it. If you don't, make an adjustment. It's not that difficult, really. It just requires a little bit of planning. Good. So thanks for the comments on the ring lights. I just have some really cheap, I think they're Neewer lights. These Neewer lights off of Amazon come with selfie sticks. And so because they're threaded selfie sticks, I just put the little screws in my desk here, and I mounted the lights right to the desk. You can get them with clamps. They'll clamp on the side of the desk. That works too. These were, I think, two lights for $12 or $15. It wasn't very much at all. And they're USB powered. So I have them running to a USB port in power strip underneath my desk. So good. I don't see any other questions here. Thank you again for attending. If you do have any questions, certainly leave them here. I'll make sure to check back in regardless of which platform we're on and engage with any comments that you have after the live stream. And you're welcome to visit me, direct message me on LinkedIn or send me an email. My handle are the same on almost all the social networks at Branding Dynamo. Thank you. Have a great weekend, and we will see you next Career Happy Hour. Take care.